Oh, I forgot to take the picture off there, guys. Hang on 1 second. Trying to mix it up there, buy myself some more time to share. Welcome to the Fantasy and Gambling Show on the All About the Birds Network. I am Phil Stifel, a.k.a. Bearded Knowledge, joined as always by the fantasy expert, Jason Sullivan, Jay Sully, 2121. Unfortunately, we're missing our partner in crime, Josh Gamble, this week. He will be back next week. Hope he's doing all right at home. Before we get started, make sure if you're watching, drop your comments, anything. Start sit-em questions, trade questions, anything you got to do with fantasy or gambling, drop them in the comment section. We'll answer them immediately. Got lots to dive into today. We've got, all our daily fantasy stacks as we talk about every single week. There's a lot of news going on in the NFL with injuries, with trade potential, and with obviously Le'Veon Bell signing with the Kansas City Chiefs tonight. So we're going to dive right into it all. Guess we'll get started with our daily fantasy and our daily fantasy stacks. Jason, welcome to the show, of course.
Thanks, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, and let's dive right in with our best stack of the week.
Best stack of the week. Cannot believe I'm saying this, but the New York Giants at the Miami Dolphins is my favorite stack of the week. Wow. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is too cheap for his own good. He's a steal at the price point. 25 points in 4 of the last 5 games. And going against the Jets, who are just absolutely god-awful. So I think he's pretty much a guarantee for about 25 points, which I'll take any day of the week for 5,900. I like pairing him with Devontae Parker, 6,300. He's Fitz's favorite target, obviously. He doesn't get many red zone touches, but he's scoring a lot of touchdowns either way, so we'll take long touchdowns any day. He has at least 11 points in 4 of the last 5 weeks as well, so I'll take that. I like pairing him with the extremely underpriced Jamison Crowder. Again, can't believe I'm saying that, but I am. 27, 20, and 28 points in his 3 games this season so far. He's had at least 10 targets in each game too. So, and this is a fun fact I found just before we started today. He's averaging 111 yards per game, which is the highest total of any receiver on the slate, on the main slate this week. So I think that's a great stack. Leaves you with 52.83 per player to finish up your lineup, which I love. That's a lot of money.
Thanks for checking in, Phil Zone. And we already got a question here. I think I talked about this on off the air before we got started. Johnny Uleka, one of the co-hosts of All About the Birds, he's curious if trading Joe Mixon for Aaron Rodgers and Ronald Jones, who's winning that trade?
To be honest with you, I would say Phil is winning that trade.
I'm the one that got Aaron Rodgers andRonald Jones.
I like Mixon. Don't get me wrong, I like Mixon. I have Mixon in 2 leagues, but
don't be nice. Don't sugarcoat it. Throw him under the bus.
I like Johnny too, so I don't want to rag on him too bad. But, no, I think you got the better end of that trade. I'm not a huge Ronald Jones guy. I never have been, but Aaron Rodgers is borderline MVP candidate this year.
Just so the viewers know, in the All About the Birds League, I am the one that had Dak Prescott, so instantly was scrambling. We'll get into the Dak Prescott, Andy Dalton talking a little bit. So obviously,
you know what, too, though?
I'm sorry?
I actually heard that you told me I believe that he also has Patrick Mahomes. So if he needs a running back, that kind of evens it out a little bit too. So
absolutely. But I'll still, he does have, Patrick Mahomes. Yes, I know. I still think I won. I still think I won that deal. That was a no-brainer click yes for me. So obviously, I agree with you on the Dolphins. I think they're a great play this week for sure. Boo, Aaron Rodgers all the way. Absolutely. What would be your next most favorite stack of the week right there then?
This is another one that kind of makes me want to throw up in my mouth a little bit, but the next stack of the week is Jacksonville versus Detroit. Gardner Minshew, I think you can actually go either way with this stack, but Gardner Minshew, 6,400, at least 20 points in 4 of the last 5 games, going against a god-awful Detroit Lions defense that I have to watch every week. Yes. They can't stop anybody, so I think Minshew's in line for another good week. LaVista Shenault, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but I think I am. $5,200, that's pretty cheap, and he's on the rise. DJ Chark might not play this week. They're both actually injured right now, but Chenault's more likely to play than Chark, according to the reports today. So he has at least over 10 points in all but 1 game this season. And with Chark not playing, he's going to be the go-to target for that team. So I like that. And I like bringing it back with Kenny Golladay, 6,200. Obviously, Matt Stafford's favorite target. There's not going to be a lot of defense played in this game. So 16 and 17 points for Golladay in the first 2 games and a lot of red zone targets. So I think that's a pretty solid stack. Leaves you, again, with 53.67. So I've always preached this whole year about playing the higher-end quarterbacks, but I think this is a week to switch it up a little bit. I think there's a lot of value at the quarterback position.
It's pretty funny because I don't know if you play FanDuel also or not, but they had a big outage last week. And I always put the 444 entry in there, Millionaire Maker, at least once or twice. And I have a couple free entries. So if you didn't cash last week in FanDuel, check your notifications because they're giving a lot of free tickets away and all. So actually, I've got 3 entries in their Millionaire Maker this week. My stacks this week are Fitzpatrick and Parker, and I didn't pick Crowder. I forget who the other one is. I picked in that one. I picked the Jacksonville stack, and I actually picked the Detroit stack too. So they're the 3 stacks that just jump out at me this week as great plays this week.
Yeah, I think they're all going to be pretty popular, so you are going to have to differentiate a little bit in your lineups, but I think with that much money on the table, you're definitely able to do so. So, yeah I definitely think those are 2 value stacks.
To get guys like Derrick Henry or, other big-name guys that, cost you a lot more. So, yeah, I definitely like them.
Too, this week, there's a lot of running backs that I want to play, so which is cool because a lot of them are higher priced, so you're getting that savings in the other positions to actually pay up at running back this week, which I think is key.
Okay. So that literally crossed, most of the games I had to ask you about off the board, normally you have like 1 or 2 of your stacks that, I like, and the rest I have to ask, but I'm going to ask a couple other games that I'm eyeing up, obviously not just because I just traded for Aaron Rodgers. What's up, Adam? Thanks for checking in again. If anybody's got fantasy questions, start sit questions, drop them in the comment section. We'd love to answer them for you. But not just because I picked up Aaron Rodgers, but I also have Aaron Jones. I love Aaron Jones. What do you think of the Packers-Bucks game?
That's an interesting game. I think you can stack that going either way, too. I was actually thinking about adding that as one of my stacks. I was debating on which side to take, so that's kind of why I didn't include it. But I like, obviously, Devontae Adams. If he's back this week, that's huge. If he's not back, Aaron Jones usually goes off when Devontae Adams doesn't play. So I like that. And I actually like Tom Brady this week, which I normally don't play him in fantasy ever. But especially if his weapons are healthy, I think it's going to be a pretty high-scoring game. And so, yeah, I like both ways in that game.
Yeah, we got Johnny asking again about Madison. If Cook's out, it does seem like Cook probably will be out. It's probably smart. They have a bye next week. He gets a good 2 full weeks to heal up and rest up and all. And he obviously went off for 18 for 100 something. Do you like Madison this week?
I do. I was kind of a little bit of sticker shock when I first saw his price, 7,200. I was a little bit kind of thrown off.
Really fast.
Yeah, you're used to seeing him in like the 4s, maybe the low 5s, but yeah, he obviously jumped really fast. That's a good situation. They're going to want to run the ball. My buddy Kirk Cousins is not a very good quarterback, so they're definitely going to want to pound the rock. And I think if Cook doesn't play, Madison's going to be a smash play.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about the Vikings-Falcons game anyway. Someone's asking now, is that game getting canceled? I think there was some rumors that they had COVID, but I think it's been backtracked that only some personnel that work for them have it. So as of this moment, the game is still going on. I'm not sure what I think about that game as a whole. Falcons just lost just fired, Quinn, their coach. I'm not sure where I'm leaning on that game, and the Vikings have been atrocious this year. So it's a game I'm trying my hardest to stay away from for daily and for season-long.
Yeah,
fantasy.
For sure. I've heard a lot of talk about Matt Ryan this week, which means his ownership numbers are probably going to be pretty high. He's been god-awful. I don't know if you've seen him play at all this year, but he has been terrible, missing receivers left and right. Obviously, a lot for him depends on if Julio Jones plays or not, so that's a big thing to watch this week. I think he's trending to play right now, so I think it'd be okay. I don't like to stack that game at all, but I can see putting pieces in. Adam Thielen's actually one of my favorite wide receiver plays for this week, so I like him and I like Madison, but I don't know if I would touch much else in that game.
Another one of the leagues I'm in, the Scotty Talk Sports, another friend of the All About the Birds and another co-writer for the team and all. I've got Deshaun Watson and I had Calvin Ridley. It's one of the trades I made. I'll get into the Calvin Ridley trade I made in a little bit. He was trying to get Deshaun Watson for me, and I thought pairing Matt Ryan up with Calvin Ridley would be a good play. But I was trying to explain to him that Matt Ryan was not playing well enough to get what he was, offering in that trade. So. Yeah, so that didn't work out, and I just got rid of Calvin Ridley anyway. So Johnny wants to know about with Le'Veon gone. We'll get into the Chiefs part of it. LaMichael Perine. I'm not sure what the Jets running backs are going to do. I don't know what the Jets are doing, period. In my opinion, Adam Gase will be fired pretty soon. So I'm personally staying away from the Jets players outside of Jamison Crowder pretty much altogether.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much doing the same. That team in general with Gase leading the charge really scares me. You don't know what that running back split's going to look like. Obviously, Frank Gore's still in the mix, even though he's 100 years old. But yeah, it's hard to say what their stacks are going to, or what their lineups are even going to be. So I don't see him getting more than maybe 7 to 10 touches, which doesn't make him viable for me.
Not at all. So obviously with the stacks and with the daily fantasy play, we always end it talking about the Eagles matchup for the week. We got the Eagles-Ravens this week. Coming off the loss, obviously, to Pittsburgh. Their offense did start to turn around last week. Obviously, everybody's jumping on the Travis Fulgham bandwagon with his huge game last week and the winning touchdown the week before, where you talked about Madison's price jump so much. Fulgham's only I believe it only jumped to 4,700 this week. So even though he might not go off for the 10 for 150, it's something to at least think about there. Any other thoughts fantasy-wise on that game?
Yeah, no, I agree with that point completely. I also like Miles Sanders, which a lot of people I think are going to shy away from. I saw a projection today that he was only going to be 2 to 3% owned because obviously Baltimore's defense is good. Wow. But I like him. If he's going to, get – the problem is touches, obviously, which you guys always harp on. He needs more touches. Yeah, only 11 rushes last week.
I'll repeat the stat on that from last night. He is second – that I brought up last night. He's second in the league in yards and 14th in touches in the first half of games. But in the second half of games, he's 33rd in yards and 25th in touches. And that's not good enough at all.
Yeah, it's so hard to figure out. Obviously, you guys see it up close and personal, but even as an outsider, it just doesn't make any sense. You have the most talented guy on the entire team getting, such limited touches, especially in the second half. Doesn't make any sense to me at all. But I actually like him this week. I don't think Baltimore's defense is quite as good as people think it is. Yeah. And I can see him getting a couple long runs against them, which makes him viable, especially 2 or 3% ownership. I think that's a smash play.
Yeah, no, I think that I didn't see that report there and on. I think the Eagles actually play pretty well this week. I think, like you said, the Ravens defense isn't what it used to be. I could see if they get down early, maybe they are passing a lot. But I think the Eagles have some tricky or sneaky plays this week. So we got a question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say we got a question here. He's got to start 3 running backs here. He's got Miles Sanders. He's got Madison. He's got Gaskin from Miami. He's got Hilaire, and he's got Montgomery. Which guy? PPR. They're commenting now. Which 3 are you playing out of those guys this week?
I'm guessing JT is Jonathan Taylor, correct?
Probably, yeah. And then Montgomery. He's got 6.
I actually like Jonathan Taylor. I actually like Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, he's got good running backs. I like Miles Sanders for sure, Madison, and probably Taylor this week. I just like the way that game's stacking up. Montgomery is obviously getting more touches now in the backfield, not only in the backfield, but also catches as well. So he's not a terrible play either. But, yeah, I would go Sanders, Madison, and Jonathan Taylor for sure.
Yeah, and if you're not going to – I agree with Miles Sanders and Madison. The only thing I'm going to say is maybe Hilaire this week. Le'Veon Bell, everybody's going to get scared of Hilaire this week, but Le'Veon Bell just signed tonight.
He's not playing this week, so.
Not playing this week, so don't worry about that. We can get into that later, but that play in general, Bell's not going to take that many touches, even when he is playing away from Hilaire. So don't be scared of Hilaire. Be more scared of the fact that, so in season-long fantasy, I wrote it down, Hilaire week 1 had almost 16 points, or almost 20 points. He had 19.8 points in week 1. He had 13 points in week 2. 18 in week 3, and then went down to 12 and then 11 in the last 2 weeks. So his production has gone down pretty much steadily since week 1.
For sure.
So be scared of his production going down, not Le'Veon Bell being there. So, but
yeah. Well, I think the most alarming part is that he struggles in the red zone, which is not what you want, obviously, out of a fantasy running back. Bell's
5 weeks.
Yeah, I would imagine Bell's going to get all the goal line work for that team, so that scares me for Hilaire for sure. Yeah. I was going to make one more point, too, about Philadelphia while we were on the topic. It seems like, much like my terrible Detroit Lions, Philadelphia plays up to their level of competition. Mm-hmm. And so playing better teams like Pittsburgh last week, Baltimore this week, I think you could see them giving a pretty good effort this week. And I don't think that game's going to be – it's going to be close for sure. I don't know if they're going to win, but it's going to be pretty dang close.
The game last week against the Steelers was close till they gave up that late touchdown on 3rd and 8 when they had, their stellar linebacker Nathan Geary guarding Chase Claypool out of the slot, and he just got destroyed. Before that play, it was a really right down the, right down the line. So let's dive into this question. We're getting this, nonstop. All different fantasy sites are talking about it. You got Dak Prescott, you got Andy Dalton. Dak Prescott's down for the year, obviously, which was a horrific injury. I'm a big Dak Prescott fan. I know he plays for my bitter rival Cowboys, but I've always liked the guy. I liked him coming out of college at Mississippi State. He gave me a little bit of coming out of college, he gave me a little bit of a Dante Culpepper, Donovan McNabb type vibe. That really strong running back with a little bit better passing skills and all. So it's really sad to see him go. In my opinion, if you have Dak Prescott and you can't make a trade like I did for Aaron Rodgers, picking up Andy Dalton is not a bad plan to at least start to see how it goes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just look at all the weapons that he has. Obviously, you have an elite running back. You have 3 stud receivers. I mean, you have a pretty good tight end too. So I'm not a huge Andy Dalton fan. I don't think anybody really is. But looking at what he did last week when he came in, I think he's going to be pretty solid. And I think Michael Gallup is going to be the one that benefits the most from Dalton. It seems like they had some sort of chemistry. Obviously, he was throwing a lot more to Gallup than Prescott does. So, yeah, I think he's worth a play for sure, and a pickup for sure. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable making him my number 1, but I think, having him on a roster for sure, just because of his weapons.
I mean, I know you're not big into season-long fantasy in general. You don't play in a lot of leagues. Were there any other quarterback names that might be out there in the waiver wire that you saw that you might take over Andy Dalton?
I can't believe I'm saying this either, but Gardner Minshew, he's putting up solid numbers. He's putting up almost 300 yards every single week, and he doesn't seem like he would be that good. When you watch him play, it kind of surprises you, the numbers that he puts up, but he's pretty solid.
We got Megan checking in. Here's some more people that they're looking at to replace Dalton, Fitzmagic, Cousins, Stafford. Honestly, as long as you don't have a cost per ad drop in your league, you're going to be playing the flyer wire or flyer waiver wire every week. You're looking at matchups. Obviously, we both love Fitzpatrick this week and their matchup there. This week specifically, I'd be playing Fitzpatrick this week.
Yeah, I like Fitzpatrick too. I think if you want steady, somebody he's not going to blow up every single week, but he's just going to be a steady 17 to 20 points, I would go with Matt Stafford. I think he's consistent. He's never going to blow up, like I said, but he's never going to have awful games either, which the other guys are definitely in danger. Definitely not Cousins.
Yeah. And my boy Nick checking in, he knows I love Dak. Before we drafted Carson Wentz, I was a big Dak Prescott fan. So yeah, he was my goal in that draft. I didn't think we were gonna be able to move up and get Carson Wentz at all. So yes, I am a Dak Prescott fan.
It's hard not to like Dak, honestly. I mean, he's just a good guy. It's tough to see something. I'm not a Cowboys fan, but it's tough to see that.
Season or awful year personally, and this injury just takes the cake of it and all.
For sure.
All right. So we were talking about Dak Prescott. So I made a trade this week also, in another league where I gave up Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley was my number 1 wide receiver, but my next wide receiver was, I think, Hardman from Kansas City was my next best wide receiver. So my wide receivers were really weak. So I was able to turn him into what I feel like 2 solid starting wide receivers in Tyler Lockett and a guy that I made him throw him in because at the end of that game, it seemed like Andy Dalton was targeting him a little bit more than Dak Prescott was in Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup and Tyler Lockett for Calvin Ridley. I don't think it's going to change the season totally for me. But for people out there that are Michael Gallup fans and have been complaining that he's been losing touches to CeeDee Lamb and isn't the number 2 guy hypothetically there anymore, any thoughts? Did you see anything there in that game?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I really like Gallup now, especially. It seems like he had some sort of chemistry with Dalton. He had 2 big catches on that last drive. So, yeah, I really like that trade for you. Tyler Lockett, I know you said they're not huge splash guys, but Tyler Lockett has the ability to put up 30, 40 fantasy points in the game. He's a monster this year, especially with the way that Russ is playing. So, yeah, I really like that trade for you as well.
I mean, on that point, we'll get back to some other points there in a second. But we were going to talk about, surprises this year or disappointments or, whatever. Is it a surprise that DK Metcalf is having a better season than Tyler Lockett, statistically speaking, in fantasy?
It is. I think it is for sure. Because, I think it boils down to red zone targets with them. Lockett's more of like the stretch the field kind of guy, where Metcalf's more of the red zone guy. But he is an absolute monster. I thought he would be good, but I didn't think he would be this good. It seems like he's got something special going on there, and he's definitely a huge beast of a human being, so he's obviously really good in the red zone. But I think those guys, he's having a little bit better year, but I think it's honestly 1A, 1B with that team. They're both studs and could go off any given week.
I agree with that. Yeah, like I said, I'm happy getting Lockett and Gallup because, again, now I have actually 2 people that deserve to be starting instead of 1. So before we get into other surprises and disappointments, we touched on it for a second there with one of the questions, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Le'Veon Bell, that situation in Kansas City, it's obviously going to be a hot topic going into next week when there's a chance that Le'Veon Bell is playing. What do you make of the situation in a fantasy perspective?
It's going to be tough. I think it's going to be close to 50-50, though. I think you're going to see Hilaire get most of the work between the 20s, and I think Bell's going to come in, at the last second and vulture those touchdowns. And not to mention, if they're ever behind, Bell is a really good receiving back too. So obviously, we saw what he did in Pittsburgh. He would put up huge numbers, both rushing and receiving. So I think it's going to be interesting to see that breakdown. It's obviously he's going to have to build the chemistry with that, but it seems like Patrick Mahomes was pretty pumped to get him. So.
Yeah,
it's crazy that they just got another weapon too. They just have so many weapons on that team, and they just keep getting better and better.
Well, they lost Sammy Watkins again for his typical 3-week break with a hamstring problem, which seems to happen here. Edwards. I mean, he's saying that. I mean, he's dropped in fantasy points, but he's still getting touches. I mean, he had 20 touches, in the backfield, only 64 yards, but he had 20 touches in week 3, and he was catching the ball out of the backfield. He's caught. 6 for 32, 5 for 70, 3 for 40. He's had, solid, receiving yards, but I believe all those receiving yards are going to go to Le'Veon Bell.
For sure. That's one of those situations too with him is that he may be better not getting 20 to 25 touches a game. He may be better at coming in 12 to 15 touches a game, getting Bell the same, being fresh and really coming out and being that explosive back out of the backfield.
So, again, we got Megan checking in again, same thing. I don't know if anybody will be the number 1 in Kansas City now. I think it's going to take several weeks to really, hash out where those touches are going. If Bell is available, if somebody dropped Bell, pick him up in your league and definitely stack him on your bench for sure. And also be prepared to not be starting. I know a lot of people drafted Edwards in the, Hilaire in the first round, if not early second round. I know I got him in the first round. Be prepared to not be playing him week in and week out. This week, he'll still be starting, in my opinion. But definitely be prepared to have a bust of a first-round pick there, if that's the way to call it, and be not playing him regularly. He's not a sure thing anymore going forward.
No, for sure. I could see it ending up kind of like the Brown situation where they have 2 stud backs. Obviously, Chubb's hurt now, but when he's healthy, Chubb and Hunt. But you never really know which one's going to go off. So from an actual football standpoint, it's great because you have 2 stud running backs. From a fantasy perspective, you might see weeks where one goes off and the other does nothing. So it's a little bit scary.
Yeah, you always have to separate, the win-loss record and the actual game itself from fantasy because they're 2 totally different things. I got to touch on one more duo because it was again last week. A guy I've been complaining about for weeks now is Kenyon Drake, and Chase Edmonds had a solid fantasy game last week. And again, in one league, I have both Drake and Edmonds. If I could only start one, who are you starting this week?
I would start Edmonds, honestly. We've seen Drake get the bulk of the opportunity for most of the season, and he hasn't really done anything at all. Edmonds at least has the breakaway speed, a little bit more speed and big playability. So it's scary because I think they're still going to give Drake, quite a few opportunities to do it, but I like Edmonds better down the stretch. I actually thought that the Cardinals would have been a good place for Le'Veon Bell to sign as well.
Yeah.
I thought that made a lot of sense, but
yeah. Yeah, Nick, no, the Vikings game has not been canceled yet. The Falcons, it definitely seems like it was not a player that was negative or positive there. So if you got Falcons or if you got Vikings, if you need to play them. Personally, in daily fantasy, I'm staying away from that game. But in season-long fantasy, definitely play them if you need to. All right, so getting on to some of the other topics we wanted to talk about tonight. Do you have a player or two in daily fantasy and season-long fantasy that has been your most disappointing and also your most surprising player of the 5 weeks so far?
Yeah, for sure. I actually have a few disappointments to start off with. And I'm going to say this, and it's not a real football disappointment, but a fantasy football disappointment. Lamar Jackson, he is priced so highly. He was a first or second round pick in a lot of leagues. He's averaging 20 points a game, which is fine, but there's quarterbacks that are averaging 20 points a game. Matt Stafford, Gardner Minshew, Fitzmagic. There's a lot of guys that are not nearly his caliber talent that are having a lot better fantasy seasons. And he's not really doing it with his legs, which is what we depend on mostly. Obviously, that team's good, and he'll probably be great down the stretch and everything. But he's kind of been my biggest disappointment, I think, fantasy-wise. A couple other ones that I have in the mix are David Johnson. He has been 2 yards a touch pretty much this entire year. That offense is a mess anyway. So I
really thought he was going to fix it this year. I really, really did.
It just shows you how bad that trade was that Bill O'Brien made. I mean, giving up Hopkins for him is just a garbage trade.
That's where your owner steps in and stops that,
Right.
Even if your owner knows literally nothing about football, he should know enough to not let that trade go through.
Yeah, you're giving up a top 3 at worst wide receiver for a washed-up running back. That's just, it's ridiculous. My wide receiver disappointment this year is DJ Moore. He was high on everybody's list, top 5 even, and he has been kind of a mess too. I think he's even behind Robbie Anderson at this point in terms of fantasy and both real life.
Yeah, I can't believe Robbie Anderson, based off of the season he's having, stayed as a free agent for as long as he did. You know, there's a lot of teams. I mean, he'd look great on the Eagles right now as a wide receiver.
Yeah, he would for sure.
Detroit, he would look great across from Kenny Galladay right now.
Yeah. I think a big thing with Robbie Anderson, why teams are scared away, is he's had some issues off the field. He's a little bit of a head case, but it seems like, get him in a strong program. Obviously, the Jets were not a strong program, but you get him in a strong program and he could be a good player.
Yeah, I'm not disappointed in Gronk because I expected literally 0 from Gronk this year. I just in case I got disconnected from all my drafts this year, I put him in the do not draft list. So I was not expecting much from Gronk this year. And I don't know. I know he's one of those guys that falls into the Gronkowski, who was the other name I was going to say? The Cam Newton, the name value just for name value, not because they're actually AJ Green, who I'm
for years too. Jason Witten for years was the same way.
Jason Witten,
yeah.
We got another question. Should he pick? Should this guy pick up Burkhead at all? I'm not sure what your running back situation is, or what. I'm not even sure what's going on in New England right now with their running back situation. I know they had the one guy break out for a 100-yard game in their last game, but I don't know, what I feel about Burkhead at this moment.
It's hard with that team too, because it's been like this every single year where you see Burkhead have a great game one day, you see other running backs have a good game. Last year was Sony
Michel. They all take turns having breakout games, so it's really hard to pinpoint. I'm not sure what else is available, Ryan, in your league. If you want to give me a shout out a couple other names that are available, I'll let you know which ones we'd prefer. Any other disappointments or surprises that you wanted to touch on there?
Not really, for the most part. Surprises, I'm kind of surprised in a way, obviously, that Dak was as good as he was. I knew he's obviously a good player, but I mean, he was putting up monster numbers. I think he was in line to be a top 5 MVP candidate, so that hurt him going down. And then my second one, I thought he was washed, and I'll admit it, I've said it all offseason, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he looks like an absolute stud again. I don't know. Everybody's saying it's because he ditched Danica and he's focused on football again. I don't know what it is, but the dude is a flat-out stud again, and he's throwing the ball down the field, which he showed that he couldn't do before, so the past few years.
So, I mean, my disappointments or surprises, if you want to call them, obviously with the Eagles, Miles Sanders and Zach Ertz have been complete disappointments at this point. Miles Sanders was a first-round draft pick. He's right now ranked in ESPN fantasy leagues as the 17th running back at this point. That's not what we expected when people drafted him in the first round. And Zach Ertz, obviously, I mean, there's some mental things going on. I don't know if you pay attention in Detroit with Zach Ertz, but, I mean, his contract situation, his wanting of a Kittle or, Kelsey type extension, it's not going to happen. It's definitely affecting his play on the field. I mean, I think he's got under 150 yards on the season, somewhere in that range. And that's for a guy that was taken as the third tight end in most of, leagues. That's pretty big disappointment right there.
Do you think, as far as Zach Ertz, do you think that's on him, or do you think it's kind of on the coaching staff? Because it just seems like, I mean, he's getting older and everything like that, but I don't think he's slowed down to the point where one catch last week, that seems crazy that you don't game plan to get him in the
week before he had 4 catches for 9 yards. No, it's the mental aspect, in my opinion, and we touched on it a lot last night. I won't dive too deep into it tonight, but he wanted the extension. The team said no. They've got Dallas Goedert as their tight end 2, young guy. Zach Ertz is only 29, but all the Eagles fans have jumped all over tonight all week. The play where there was an interception last week where he got bumped off a route and he just didn't follow through. He just raised his hands. That's not Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz runs through that contact and then complains after the play. And he's done countless, bad body language, if you want to call them, kind of effort plays this year, which is just showing that he's letting his contract issues and his opinion of himself get in the way. Because he's getting targets. He was tied for second in targets last week. He only had the 1 catch, but he had 6 or 7 targets last week. So he's still getting the looks from Carson. He's just not following through on the drives and all. So that's where that comes in.
So it seems like more of a mental thing with him.
100% a mental. It looks like if you watch his body language, even in practice today, there were some videos of him in practice today. He had no desire, it looked like, to be out there. So there was a big trade. We could dive into trades next. There was an ESPN article from Trey Wingo put out today about some potential trades out there. One of them was, Zach Ertz to the Cardinals for Hassan Reddick and a third round pick. I don't think that's a good enough trade for Zach Ertz, even with his drop off in production. But are there any players out there right now that you're looking at that if they got traded anywhere could like boost or on the flip side hurt their trade value massively
for sure
they get moved from their team?
Yeah, I actually have two that are both from my Detroit Lions. I say that kind of half-heartedly, but Kenny Golladay, they're not going to sign him. They kept saying around Labor Day that they had deals that were close. Oh, it's been reported a deal is in place, but he hasn't signed. They're going to lose him as a free agent if he doesn't sign.
Is he on his last year of his deal?
Yeah, he's on the last year of his deal. So I could see him going to a team that needs a receiver. I mean, the Eagles. No,
Eagles. I'll take him. No problem.
No, I'm not sure he's a flat-out number one receiver, but I think a lot of teams in this league could deal with him as their number two and be very happy with it. So I could see him going somewhere. The problem is with the Lions, you're going to see how serious they are about the future this year. They have, ideally, you would trade him. You could even trade Matt Stafford. It sounds crazy to say, but you need to start rebuilding, and you'll see if Quinn and Patricia are ready to do that or if they're just looking out for themselves and trying to win this year. But yeah, I think either one of those could get traded. I actually had a hot take. This is an extremely hot take. I just thought of this right before we came on. Matt Stafford to the Indianapolis Colts.
I was going to bring up the Colts on this trade market too. I did not think of Stafford there, but I like that.
Phillip Rivers is awful, and they have good weapons. They have good receivers. It's just like he just can't get the ball downfield to them. T.Y. Hilton's been a non-factor.
We'll get back to that trade in a second. You bring up Phillip Rivers. Who's looking worse at this point, Phillip Rivers or Drew Brees? Because they both look like they have no arm strength whatsoever.
They both can't throw the ball more than 5 yards down the field. I would take Drew Brees over Phillip Rivers because Phillip Rivers throws like I don't even understand how a pro quarterback can throw that badly. And now that he has no arm strength, he looks even worse.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. We got a question. Adam's asking, would Nelson Aguilar be worth picking up? The Las Vegas Raiders. I know he's put up some big touchdowns and all, and he's had some big plays this year. He's not their number one threat, and I'm pretty sure they had some injuries on that wide receiver group, and that's why he's getting the playing time. If you're desperate, if they're going up against a bad defense, maybe it's worth a look.
The only thing with him is that I worry that he's probably the fourth option on that team, so I'm not sure if I'd be too pumped to grab him.
It's going to be a boom or bust if you pick him up. He's either going to go off and have a 50-yard touchdown, or he's not going to. He's going to get 10 yards, and that's it. So
he's the classic. He's the classic two-catch guy. You'll see 2 catches for 80 yards, and if he happens to get a touchdown, it's worth it. If not, then it won't be worth it. So.
Another person checking in, Logan, about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Again, we already talked about it. This week, don't worry about him, but definitely have a backup plan for next week and going forward because he's definitely going to be taking the red zone touches. He's definitely going to be taking those third down out of the passing game touches. And if Le'Veon Bell shows that he's still got something left in the tank and it was more – the Jets, maybe with Robbie Anderson, same thing, who knows, what's going to happen there. So definitely be prepared to have to bench, Helaire in the coming weeks. This week's not the week, but in the coming weeks, be prepared to have to bench him. And as we said, Bell's available, in your league, pick him up.
Yeah, I would say don't jump to any conclusions with the Chiefs. I think you need to, obviously wait and see what happens with that, where it's going to be hard to guess what happens until we actually see it. So maybe wait 2-3 weeks and then we can, dive into that.
Yeah, interesting question here. Nobody ever talks defense on DraftKings or anything else. A defense can, like last week, the Ravens had, I think it was 27 points on DraftKings. Defenses can help you, go from not cashing to min cashing to getting 3, 4, 5 times return on your money. Any defenses you like this week?
I am the wrong source to ask this. I miss on my defense. I have defenses that I like every single week, and they miss every single week. Who do you play for fantasy defenses?
In the daily fantasy, it's a week by week matchup. I'm actually I was trying to stall. I thought you would give me like 30 seconds. I was gonna pull up some of my lineups and who I'm looking at this week. As I'm doing that, hold on 1 second here. Oh man, you're calling me out right here.
Here, I'll pull up DraftKings too. Honestly, the biggest thing I look at with defenses, I look obviously at the point total, what the point total is projected to be in the game, but I always pick home favorites. I just happen to always pick the wrong home favorites this season. So,
all right. Well, on DraftKings this week in my lineup, which at this point of the week, my lineup can change 3 or 4 more times. I have the Dolphins defense going up against the Jets. They only average 6 points a game right now. But anybody that's going up against the Jets, I like. The other defenses that I really like this week looking at it. The Washington football team, their defense going up against the Giants, it's a team that, defense I'll look at a little bit.
I think the Steelers, too. I think the Steelers are always worth it. Obviously,
I wanted to say the Steelers, too, there, and I was just like, they're definitely an option. And
Cleveland's looked a lot better, but anytime Baker Mayfield plays, he could have 3 turnovers. So I think
I would say stay away from the Ravens this week. The Eagles are a much better team than the Bengals, so the numbers they put up last week probably won't happen. And then you got the Colts. The Bengals were pretty on fire for a little while this year. Joe Burrow's going to hit a little rough patch here, and they have a really great defense. So, I don't mind the Colts defense this week. That's going to definitely be a low-scoring game for sure.
The Colts is definitely a good pick. They never give up big plays. Their defense doesn't do anything flashy, but they just don't give up big plays. So yeah, they're pretty solid 8 or 9 points every single week.
Brian, don't let anybody tell you defenses can't win you money in daily fantasy.
They can, and they do.
Right defense. It's the difference between cashing and not cashing right there. Yeah. Same thing with kickers. If you're in a league that does kickers or whatever, or has kickers, in your season long, you have a bad kicker, Last week, Jake Elliott had 2 points for me in my daily fantasy league. I normally don't pay attention to kickers, but it was a killer for sure. You know what I mean?
It could cost you 10, 12 points a week. That's definitely worthwhile.
Absolutely. All right, we're not going to do too much more. We're got a couple more trades to talk about here. Are any wide receivers out there that you think that can make a difference? Jacksonville's got a group of young receivers. You never know which one. And then there's another name that he flat out said on live TV on the sideline last week, if you're not going to use me, trade me. Did you see that?
I did not.
If you're a lip reader,
AJ Green.
AJ Green said, if you're not going to pass me the ball, trade me. And the camera caught it just the right moment. Any thoughts if their values will be any better elsewhere? I've heard rumors of the Jags trading wide receivers for 2 years now, and it just doesn't seem to happen. And AJ Green, I know he's dropped off production wise, but I think with a good quarterback can still be a viable option in fantasy.
I think just about 99% chance that he gets traded. I think that's the most obvious one. I completely forgot about that one. His body language. You want to talk about body language? He has been so you can just tell he's just always pissed off when he's on the field. And so I don't know exactly what team would want to pick him up, but I think he could be a stud, 2 or 3 receiver for a good team.
Yeah. Should I drop Devontae Freeman for Madison?
I would.
Yes, probably. I might actually. You said yes?
I would, for sure. I actually like Devontae Freeman this week in daily fantasy.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe you don't drop him per se. If you got somebody weaker on your team, maybe you drop. Because Madison's only going to be getting the touches for this week. Next week, they've got the bye. And then after that, Dalvin Cook's expected to be back. So you might not want – I don't know what the rest of your running back situation looks like, Oscar. I might try to drop somebody else and just hold on to Freeman because, he put up some solid numbers last week with the Giants. And, they're going to be behind. He knows how to catch the ball out of the backfield. I might try to hold him.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually like him in daily fantasy this week, too. Like you said, he had a pretty good game last week. They don't have much else in terms of competition for him, so he's going to get the bulk of the work for that team. That's a good point by you.
Yeah. No, I'm going to try to hold on to him if I can. But again, if Madison's available, you got to find a way to pick him up this week because he's going to get a boatload of touches, and the Falcons' defense is just trash. So he's a guy that you need to play this week. All right, so you brought up Matthew Stafford. Hold on, we got another question. Could you see Julio Jones get traded? I was going to bring up the Falcons in general in their trade. That was actually the next question on the list here. Actually, that I was going to skip, but the Falcons, they might be in a sell mode. Julio Jones, would look really good in Eagles green for sure. I'm not sure about any other team, but he would definitely. I don't know his contract situation, so I can't talk about it for the Eagles. So
yeah, I don't know his contract situation either, but that makes a lot of sense. They have Russell Gage and they have Calvin Ridley, correct? Yeah, so they have other receivers. They have a lot of problems. They can't stop anybody on defense. Obviously, Matt Ryan looks terrible. So if they can trade somebody to get some extra picks, I don't think I would hesitate to do that. Julio Jones is obviously awesome, but he also is another one of those guys that gets hurt 2 or 3 weeks every single year. He's always questionable. He's always kind of limited with ankle injuries or foot injuries or whatever the case may be, hamstring. So I don't think I wouldn't mind that if I was an Eagles fan.
No. So the question I was going to get to was you brought up Matthew Stafford getting traded. 2 young quarterbacks. They're not really relevant right now in fantasy. But the ESPN article that I brought up a little bit ago had Sam Darnold going to the Colts. I mean,
I could see that too.
Got a lot of hype coming out of college, and he can sling the ball. You get him on a team with a direction, with a coach like Frank Reich, who has made Nick Foles into the greatest backup quarterback of all, one of the highest paid backup quarterbacks of all time. He's someone I would consider. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially for I think that would be a great situation that you just said with the Colts. I think that he needs guidance. He needs a coach that actually knows how to coach him, and Adam Gase is probably the farthest thing from that, maybe outside of Matt Patricia in terms of developing people. But he obviously has shown flashes of being really good. He's mobile. He can throw. He's got a strong arm. Yeah, it might be a good situation. And if you're the Colts, you can't be pumped about Phillip Rivers right now.
No. I mean, they're paying him, $25 million on a 1-year deal? That has to be.
Right, that's the worst part. I mean, is there anything worse than a good football team with a terrible quarterback?
I mean, they have one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in the league, and they can't win games. I mean, I'm not sure why they haven't moved on to Jacoby Brissett yet, because he did not play that bad last year.
No,
and I'm not sure why they even brought in Phillip Rivers in the first place. Because again, I mean, he wasn't a world beater, but he was better than what Phillip Rivers is showing at this point.
Oh, and for sure.
Could you imagine if you did not give Phillip Rivers $25 million? When you have a salary cap in a sport, what that $25 million could have done to that team. I mean, they'd be how much better if they were spending that elsewhere. They could be upgrading their defense even more, bringing in another running back, wide receiver. Who knows what they could be doing?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other fantasy comments, thoughts or whatever before we drop a couple quick plays this week and then wrap this show up?
I think my only last comment would be kind of a little bit of fantasy advice. I've noticed in the first few weeks that people shy away from matchups. I think matchups are obviously they're important a little bit to a certain extent. Obviously, you want to see the point totals for the week, but I think getting scared off of elite players in fantasy is not the right thing to do. You saw DeAndre Hopkins comes to mind the first week of the season playing against the 49ers defense that everybody thought was awesome. You can find really low-owned guys, Miles Sanders this week for one, that's going to be 2 or 3% owned that could break a slate because he's that good of a player. So don't shy away from tough matchups, especially on the road, because you can get guys at really low ownership.
So I want to ask you a question. I want to pick your brain on that. How do you determine which one of those big name players is going to have that low? Because that low ownership percentage is really key with the big name players and all. Mm-hmm. What do you look for? Are you looking at the matchup, or are you looking at how are you determining Miles Sanders? You think he's going to have 2-3%? What are you looking at that's getting you that thought process on? Hey, pick this big name guy up because he's going to be owned very lowly this week.
I think a lot depends on your lineup construction. I look at it is if I'm going to have chalky stacks, which I'm going to have chalky stacks this week, I'm going to find that low-owned running back with potential to break the slate. And I always try to, especially in GPPs. If you play cash, it's different. I don't really play cash. In GPPs, you're trying to hit a home run. So you want that guy. You want those 1 or 2 guys on your team that are 2, 3, 4% owned that have the potential to score 25 points in a game. And you're not going to get that from value plays, but you can get that from a guy like Miles Sanders. He breaks 1 or 2 long runs and boom, you're right in it. And I look at it the same way with not just Miles Sanders, but with other positions as well. If there's questions at the top with a few guys that, there's maybe 5 elite receivers that you want to play, go for the one with the least amount of ownership, because if he booms, which he can any given week, that puts you in a good spot to win.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you got to, everybody's complaining. Well, you brought up Miles Sanders, so we're gonna use that as the example. People are talking about how he's not getting used right, and he's not, his second half touches aren't enough. Yes, he went 10 for 6 last week, 10 rushes for 6 yards, and then 1 rush for 74 yards and a touchdown. Mm-hmm. That's all you need. You can't look at it as the team and as the game and the final results. You got to look at, the fantasy aspect of it. You got to separate the two, and that's where a lot of people lose. They can't separate their fandom or their, overall, They hear the stats from the big names and look, Miles Sanders had 10 touches for 6 yards. They can't see the other aspect of that. So they really got to be able to separate the two really well.
Oh, 100%. I think that's key.
I know you're not a big gambler. You don't really touch too much on it. I looked at some of the lines this week. I'm actually really scared this week on the lines. There's not the lions, the lines. There's not a lot of game. What's that?
I said I'm scared about the Lions too.
I'm scared about the Lions.
Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
I actually was going to bring that game up, but there's not a lot of lines that jump out at me this week. The first one that jumps out at me is the Dolphins Jets. I know it's 9.5 points, and the Dolphins aren't a super team, but the Jets are just straight trash. So they're at home, the Dolphins. The over-under is only 47.5. I like that game, probably the 9.5 points. The Titans, I know they're coming off a short week. They're home. They're a favorite. 3.5 points to the Texans. I know the Texans won last week after firing Bill O'Brien. I kind of like that game. I like the over in that game, too, at 54.5. And I like the Colts-Bengals game. I like the Colts at home. They're 8-point favorites. The Bengals, they crushed me last week, so they'll probably crush me again this week if I go against them. That was me and Josh's number one play was the Bengals minus 12.5 and the over. And that game just crushed everything I did last week. But I do like that game this week. The Lions are 3.5-point favorites on the road against the Jags. I don't know how I feel about that game. Maybe the over-under at 54.5, but your thoughts on your home team this week based off of the spread or the over-under?
They're not going to be able to stop each other. I can tell you that right now. So I think maybe the over in that game might be the way to go. Two terrible defenses, two decent offenses, but two terrible defenses.
Yeah.
Matt Patricia is getting fired. He should already be fired. So him and Bob Quinn are both getting canned.
Let's take your bias out of the equation on Matt Patricia getting fired. I agree he should. But who gets fired first if you're going to place a bet, him or Adam Gase?
Adam Gase.
Yeah, I agree with you. Adam Gase is –
which is crazy. Well, I mean, they're both terrible. So
he tried to give up play calling duties this week. There was an article about it, and he asked his assistant coaches who should call the plays, and they all said you should call the plays. I wouldn't even want any of his assistants now on my team.
No.
If that's their answer. That's just a train wreck.
Too, when you see them cut a player like Le'Veon Bell, obviously they're trying to lose at this point. They want Trevor Lawrence, so
everybody.
They're not even trying.
Yeah. Why would they do have a good quarterback. I'm a big fan of Sam Darnold. I thought he was out of that quarterback class coming out 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whenever it was, with Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen. I liked him the most. I just think he's in a bad situation there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I have a question. Speaking of Josh Rosen, what do you think are the chances he gets traded, and is he worthwhile to even pick up?
Josh Rosen, he's with Tampa on their practice squad right now, right?
Yep.
I think his best bet for himself personally is not to get traded. Sit there and continue to learn from Tom Brady. I know he's not, dressing every week and all, but he's another guy that I thought had some potential. But does he go somewhere? I'm not sure. But honestly, his best personal thing, and just another name that was on my trade list was Dwayne Haskins. They need to be somewhere where they could sit and learn. There's nothing wrong with look at Aaron Rodgers. He sat for 3 years. There's nothing wrong with sitting for a few years, holding that clipboard, sitting on the practice squad, and learning from all-time greats. Aaron Rodgers learned from, Brett Favre. They might not have had the greatest personal relationship, but, you just watching the way they prepare each week, goes a long distance. And I think Josh Rosen could be a better quarterback in the future from his time just watching Tom Brady right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that too. You got to think too, Patrick Mahomes didn't even start his first year. It helps, especially. It's hard to jump from college to the pros. I think sitting for a year like Tua is this year is really going to help him down the line.
Tua's a guy kind of like Justin Herbert, where I thought they'd be pushed into action pretty early because of bad teams. What's his name? Is Flores the coach of what's the Dolphins coach?
Yeah, Flores. Yeah.
Flores. He's got that team playing well down there. I mean, they're not going to win their division or anything like that, but he's got Ryan Fitzpatrick playing well. He now has the luxury to sit Tua as long as he wants. Tua can get fully healthy,
right?
Get used to the NFL and all that. And that's another guy. Matthew Fitzpatrick's a great guy to learn from.
Oh yeah, for sure.
He's played for 17 different teams so far.
Yeah.
So, I'll throw for any baseball people out there. He's the Randy Reddy of football, right now. And do you know who
Edwin Jackson? Yeah.
If you know Randy Reddy, that's pretty good because he played back in the late 80s, early 90s for the Phillies a couple times. And he literally, I still remember from my childhood, his suitcase, and it had a sticker from every team he played on. It covered half the suitcase. That's my baseball reference for the show. We'll close with the Eagles line. Eagles are 7.5-point dogs to the Ravens. I took the Eagles last week at 8.5 or 7.5, whatever it was. It didn't work out, obviously. 7.5 set magic number. I think it's going to be a close game again. For those bettors out there, again, I always say if you're an Eagles fan, you stay away from the Eagles. You don't bet your home team. I don't dislike that line, though. And the over-under at 48 points. The Ravens score 25 to 28 points a game. The Eagles could very easily go for 28 points. The over in that game is something that, if I was to bet it, I'm looking more at the over than the 7.5 points. I'm hoping that line goes up a little bit more, but Yeah, I mean, I think the Eagles probably, it's going to be a 3-point game, whether it's 31-28 Eagles, 28-24, Ravens. That's what you're looking at there, which covers the spread and the over-under.
Yeah. I like bet the over in that game. That's one thing I definitely feel in that one. The spread, I don't know. I'm not sure about how close it's going to be, but yeah, I like the over for sure, like you said.
When you're gambling, I always say it's really good to pay attention to the fantasy shows also, because the teams that everybody wants to stack and the games that they're, stacking from both teams from, like we're looking at the Detroit-Jacksonville game. You could stack either way. We're looking at the Miami Dolphins. There's games like that. They're the games you want to look at the over-under at and focus on, because if there's going to be a lot of fantasy points, it means the score is going to be high. So it's something I always look at before I make my picks, is the games that have the highest potential fantasy out point, because they have the chance for the over-under also.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think one more piece of fantasy advice, too, that I was thinking about earlier is don't fall in love with players or teams, I guess, in gambling, too. It's the same thing. Every week is different. Treat every week differently. Just because a guy burned you last week, they could come out and put up 20 points this week, 25 points this week. Analyze each game each week with an open slate. Don't start with, predetermined positions or anything like that. Treat everybody the same and do your research from there. Don't fall in love with a player, and don't hate a player too much.
And you say don't fall in love with a player. Don't fall in love with a player just because they have name value. Just because I saw on one of the fan groups that I shared the show on tonight, and maybe some people are watching on it on Facebook. Somebody was looking to trade, I forget who it was, for Cam Newton. And Cam Newton, he was one of my dark horse MVP candidates this year, but he's not lighting the world on fire in fantasy aspect of things. Mm-hmm. So, he's a guy that, A.J. Green right now, he's not doing well because of his body language. Zach Ertz isn't playing well. Don't be picking these guys or trading for these guys just because they're big names. You got to look in fantasy terms of what they're doing. And track record, does play an aspect into it. Just this year. Don't look at what they did 2 years ago or 3 years ago. When was the last time Cam Newton was relevant fantasy? 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Yeah. Don't be just making that move. I'm sure, I think it was because the guy had lost Dak Prescott. And he was saying, is Cam Newton a better player this week than, Andy Dalton? My response was, you go right to Andy Dalton this week, not Cam Newton. What I mean? Because don't fall in love with, don't give up major assets for Cam Newton when Andy Dalton's a waiver wire pickup. Yeah.
No, I think 100% that's the truth. And I heard so many people dogging on Andy Dalton this week, and it's like, yeah, he's not the best quarterback. We've all seen what he's done the past few years, but he was on a team that had no offensive line, not really that many weapons, and now he's on a team with a decent offensive line, a ton of weapons. I mean, he's not Tom Brady in his prime, but yeah, he's good.
He's got 3 starting wide receivers. All 3 of them would be a number 1 on any other team. Yep. He's got one of the top 5 running backs in the league in Ezekiel Elliott. Their offensive line is actually a little shaky, and that is actually something that concerns me with him. They've had a couple injuries in the last week or two, and Andy Dalton is not as mobile as Dak Prescott. So that does concern me a smidge there, but he's not somebody you want to shy away from immediately. You're not going to trade a major asset unless you're getting Aaron Rodgers, for Joe Mixon, and unless that's what you're getting. Before that trade was offered, I had Andy Dalton in my waiver wire pickup list. So yeah, don't fall in love with name values in fantasy. Anything else? Because I think we'll wrap it up. We normally go 30, 35 minutes. We're pushing an hour here tonight.
I got all fired up tonight. No, it was a good show.
It was a good show. See what happens when you get rid of the weak link in Josh?
He's probably watching right now.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all good. It's all in good fun. But again, thank you everybody for tuning in. It was a great show tonight. We had a lot of great questions. We're just going to continue doing this every Thursday night, 8:30. Start telling your friends, bring your fantasy questions, your stardom sit-ems, your fantasy stacks, everything else. My buddy Nick said his wife's watching. She says hi. She's our number 1 fan. Even though she knows nothing about football, she checks in on every All About the Birds show. I appreciate that. I appreciate the support. Last night's show, we have over 4,000 views. We never passed 2,500. That's insane to me. I mean, to think the little thing we just started a couple months ago is at this point. Johnny, Jeff, and I, Jason, Josh, all the writers at All About the Birds, we all appreciate it. If you're interested in writing anything football, fantasy, gambling, other teams, college, I got a guy doing draft profiles already for next year. Send us a direct message. We'll set you up. You can write for us. You never know. I started writing for Last Out Media, who also streams our shows in January, and now look what we're doing. I got 4,000 people watching the show. So definitely tune in. You never know what's going to happen. send us a message if you're interested in writing. It's great. Ryan checking in. Thanks again, Ryan. All great questions. We really appreciate it. Again, share us, follow us all. You can follow me, Phil Stifel, at Beard and Knowledge, Jason at JSully2121, Josh when he's back next week at J to the Rock or J to the _ Rock. I took it off the screen this week. I forget what it is now. But you can follow him, Josh Gamble, all about the birds at AAT Birds. Thank you very much. Jason, again, great show. Appreciate you having you on again this week. And, as I end every show, you can't say because you're a Lions fan, but as I end everything, it's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly, baby.
That's right.